Last year I presented a video on the Peak4 entitled Hype or Hydrofoiler. I created the video following my first session on the Peak4 and I was overwhelmingly impressed. Since that time, I've had more experience riding the Peak4 and I have used it in the 4-meter size from the gusty conditions of Hood River, where it was blowing up to 30 knots, to the sea breezes in St. Petersburg, Florida of 13 to 15 knots. This kite has quickly begun to replace other kites in my lineup, to the point where I commonly now only travel with a 12-meter sole and a 4-meter Peak4 to close out my hydrofoil kite quiver. Today I would like to discuss why that I think the Peak4 is something that every freeride hydrofoiler should own. And no, I have not been incentivized from Flysurfer to produce this material. This may seem like a commercial for the Peak4, but when products are this special, everyone who uses them becomes a walking, talking commercial. So let's get started with a simple checklist of positives and negatives. To start off, ease of travel and transport. This is completely minimalistic. It is basically a trainer kite that you carry around, yet it has enough power to pull you around on a hydrofoil in conditions of 13 to almost 40 miles per hour. At roughly 1.5 pounds, it leaves virtually no baggage fee limitations, unless you're traveling with 35 kites on your next trip. The Peak4 has virtually no lift, which means on the negative side, you aren't going to be boosting significantly on this kite. But it also means that launching and landing are much safer, that lit conditions are also safer, and that the Peak4 can cross over to being a great progression for your buddy that may be ready to move past a 2-line trainer kite, or when you're developing kids for kiting. This kite has no lift, so how is this beneficial for foiling? Well, I would argue that it makes you more proficient in working with your foot switches and jibing. Not relying on the kite to pull you vertically will make you that much better when you get back under your sole or your LEI. Now, are you going to be able to train on tacks with the Peak4? Probably not, but I have witnessed experienced tackers conquer the very same maneuver on the Peak4. The Peak will just not allow your footwork over the foil to be sloppy. This kite is very stable in gusty conditions. I don't even mess with the trim. I keep it powered up and I find it to be very friendly and not as flappy as some kiters have commented in the past. I actually use the small amount of audible flutter as a measure for myself, as this only occurs in the upper limits of the kite. If I can hear the kite, then I don't even consider looping the kite. If there is not canopy noise though, I feel confident in practicing loops. This kite also will fly in very light winds due to its single skin structure, which means that it really won't just fall out of the sky. It's very efficient. Many times I am foiling on the 4-meter Peak while others are out on the water and they're twin tipping on a 12 to 15 meter LEI. And that's a huge difference. So it really won't fall out of the sky, but what if it's steered out of the sky? Well, I've been out approximately 15 sessions on the Peak4 and I've yet to steer it on the water. But I did recently get hit with a freak gust which caused the Peak to collapse.
Oh no.
It did regain shape, but the left bridles were wrapped around the edge of the kite. I was just unable to loosen this tangle, but in the process the kite did hit the water a couple of times and it did relaunch. Eventually, yes, I did have to swim in, but that was due to the wrap bridle, which was a first occurrence for me, and I am regularly kiting in extremely gusty conditions. The kite sits pretty deep in the wind window and rarely do you fly it straight overhead, except when you're transitioning the kite. The water relaunch, it's still something that I need to become familiar with, but my approach will probably always be don't drop it on the water. The Peak4 is very playful and it's a great tool to become more aggressive on the water with your kite skills. Never am I able to loop my other kites in a similar manner. What also shows up when developing new kite skills is just how phenomenal that the Peak drifts. It's virtually impossible to outrun this kite. Even when you lose line tension, you don't lose the kite. It has increased my confidence on the foil. It has allowed backhand loops, kite pivots, and other nuances that make my freeride sessions even more enjoyable. And what about price? Well, if you order in the next 10 minutes, Not really, and I get it, but these kites retail for around $500 to $600. This is an absurdly cheap price point for all that they offer. Flysurfer is not able to market this kite for the water, and that's probably because of its single skin nature. But don't forget, this kite is also still a perfect kite for snow and land kiting. In my opinion, just because it's not marketed for the water, don't let that be a barrier for not adding this kite to your free ride hydrofoiling game. If you'd like to check out the Peak4 or you have other gear needs or requests, check out Green Hat Kiteboarding. I hope you will consider adding the Peak4 to your lineup, and I would love to hear all about your thoughts and experiences with this unique kite. Also, a big thanks to Pro Limit and for their new wetsuit, the Mercury Thermal Rebound. It has performed extremely well and kept me warm through the winter months. That's all for today, and thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the OK Kiteboarder.